new general manager, and we have it for you live here on Fox Sports North. Always nice to be talking hockey on a warm spring afternoon over at the Xcel Energy Center. We'll be heading inside the building shortly as the Wild will introduce their new general manager, Paul Fenton. They announced yesterday that he will become the third general manager in franchise history. We'll be going live inside the arena. Kevin Gorg is on hand. We'll hear one-on-one from the Wild's new general manager. Inside Mall of America studio, welcome to this special report. I'm Anthony LaPanta, the Minnesota Wild, announcing that Paul Fenton will replace Chuck Fletcher. He'll become the third general manager in Minnesota Wild franchise history. Fenton, in a similar path to Chuck Fletcher, spent years in the National Hockey League as an assistant general manager, also oversaw the Nashville Predators AHL team, the Milwaukee Admirals. So here is a look at the new GM for the Wild. He's been the assistant GM in Nashville since 2006. Played 411 games in the National Hockey League, spent 8 seasons in the NHL, was the general manager of the Admirals as well as the assistant GM in Nashville. He was the director of player personnel prior to that, oversaw drafts, in fact was the man responsible when the team drafted Ryan Suter, current Minnesota Wild defenseman, back as a part of that 2003 draft. Fenton steps into a situation here that Craig Leipold announced as a retool, not a rebuild, when he announced that the team would not renew the contract of outgoing general manager Chuck Fletcher. Fenton inherits a team that has been to the playoffs each of the last 6 seasons, including this past season when they finished third in the Central Division, finished 4th overall with 42 victories during the 2017-2018 season. Minnesota finished third behind Nashville and Winnipeg in the Central Division of the Western Conference. They were 5th in the West with 27 wins at home, and they were in the top 10 in the conference in both goals per game and goals against. This Wild team reaching the postseason, but knocked out in the first round for the 3rd consecutive year, this time by the Winnipeg Jets. He does not inherit a situation where the cupboard is bare. This is a franchise that has had a tremendous amount of success over the last few seasons. And in fact, if you look back since the Bruce Boudreau era started at the start of the 2016-17 season, the Wild in the top 8 in the National Hockey League in winning percentage, in goals per game, in goals against, and save percentage. The big problem and the big question that was asked was this Wild club in a position to take the next step? Because the trouble over the last few seasons has not been what they've achieved in the regular season, but rather the steps they have failed to take in the postseason. As Minnesota was knocked out in the first round by the Jets this year, last year upset in the first round by the St. Louis Blues, the year before that bounced in the first round by the Dallas Stars. And in each of those cases, the question was, did the Wild have enough goal scoring? We'll find out much more about what Paul Fenton has in mind for this club, but right now it's time to head to the Xcel Energy Center as the Minnesota Wild introduce their general manager to the state of hockey, and we check in with Aaron Sickman.
Welcome to today's press conference to introduce our new general manager, Paul Fenton. This is a very, very exciting day for us, and we're happy that you're all here to join us in this announcement. I also like to thank the media that are in attendance today's press conference, and a special thanks to the fans watching and tuning in live on Wild.com, Fox Sports North, and our other broadcast partner, KFAN. Thanks for your support and coverage of today's events. After brief comments from both Craig and Paul, we will turn things over for one-on-one questions and Q&As. For the Q&A portion, we will have mics, so please raise your hand and just state your affiliation, and we'll do questions that way. I would now like to turn things over to Minnesota Wild owner Craig Leipold.
Thank you, Aaron. Good morning again. Let me start by welcoming Coach Boudreau, and the hockey ops staff is over here, and we also have a couple of our players, Miko, Zach, and Ryan, were working out and doing their off-season workout today, and we're fortunate that they were available to come. So, guys, thank you all for being here. We've got a big part of our organization that's represented because this is a very, very exciting day for us. Let me again say that I could not be happier than having Paul Fenton join the state of hockey. We conducted a very thorough interviewing process and spoke to numerous qualified candidates. But there was one person that stood out among all of them really throughout the entire process, and that would be Paul. On all measures, Paul won the job, but the areas that stand out with Paul are his overall experience, his strength as a player evaluator, his work and ethic. Most importantly, he wants to win a Stanley Cup. I've known Paul since my early days in Nashville with the Nashville Predators, and that familiarity will help us hit the ground running here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota, starting this afternoon. His record in Nashville building their current roster, primarily through drafting and developing, speaks for itself. Paul has been a key contributor in Nashville's success. Paul also has been involved in key trades that put the finishing touches on the roster in Nashville. That experience will serve him greatly here. As I said before, I am confident we have a very good team here in Minnesota, and I believe Paul shares that opinion with me as well. I will also say that the other candidates that we spoke with all had that same belief. The goal remains to bring a Stanley Cup to the state of hockey, and no pressure, Paul, but that is where it starts today. And ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce to you the new general manager of the Minnesota Wild, Paul Fenton. Let's go that way, huh? Put your name on it.
Well, first of all, thank you, Craig. The assessment and the kind words as to my qualifications, I thank you for that. I thank you, Matt, as well, in the process here of interviewing. It had been a long time. I've been waiting for this moment for a while, and I'm thrilled to be here in the state of hockey. Coming from Massachusetts, it's where we thought there was a good hockey bed. I don't think there's anything like this in the country, and I'm really looking forward to being here. First of all, I want to thank my wife of 34 years who's sitting here, Nona. She's been the rock of everything that we do. My two boys are here with my daughter-in-law, Stephanie. PJ and Stephanie have our granddaughter who soon will be 4 this summer, Emery. We just love him to death. My youngest son, Owen, is over here. PJ actually works in hockey as well. He works with the Edmonton Oilers, so the enemy is here as well. My son, Owen, has his PhD from MIT. He is a chemist, and yes, for those of you who are guessing, he is my son. My wife can take credit, but I'm trying to latch on to him as well. This is going to be a great opportunity. I am so looking forward to being here. Our coach is here, Bruce. I look forward to working with him. Miko, Zach, and Ryan, who I drafted in Nashville and have a relationship with because of that. I am so much looking forward to working with this leadership group. Our team is not very far. I've been brought here to try and tweak this process and to get us to win a Stanley Cup. And that's what our goal is going to be from day one. It's been a pleasure meeting the staff this morning. I'm going to try to acclimate myself with everybody, as I've said before. If I don't know your name, tell me a couple times, because it's been a little bit of a whirlwind going on. But I'm here to work. I'm here to put a stamp on this thing, and we're not leaving until we do the right thing.
Good.
Thank you. We'll now open things up for questions, so please raise your hand if you have a question for Paul or Craig. Go ahead, Jim.
My name's Jim Rich. I work with Fox 9 here in Minneapolis. Welcome, First off, in the press conference that Mr. Leipold had when he announced the decision to make a change, he said he would not hire a general manager that said this has to be a total teardown. What did you tell him about this roster, about what the Wild have, and how do you feel you can fix this?
I don't know if it's a fixing process, but what I did tell him is that this team is very good. Certainly, you always have to make tweaks and changes to rosters, and to come here to a team that has been in the playoffs 6 times, it obviously doesn't need to be overhauled. You have a lot of really good veteran pieces, young guys that are coming, and I'm looking forward to just trying to put some finishing touches to help us win.
Craig, Michael Russo from The Athletic. During this whole process that you were getting intelligence from other people, did your opinion change at all about the path that this franchise needs to take in terms of tweaking and things like that? And Paul, could you also kind of take us through the agony that you've had over the years of trying to get to this spot now that you are now General Manager Paul Fenton?
Yeah, Mike, that's a good question because, of the people that we brought in, they were all experienced people. A couple of them have been general managers before, and unanimously they recognize that we are a team that is we're just missing a piece. And I mean, making the playoffs 6 years in a row tells you a lot about our team. We're a damn good team. We just need to maybe get to the next level, the next step, and what does that take? And hopefully Paul is going to help us get to that point. And I think of the interviews that we had, Paul was the one that we felt was best experienced, most experienced. The people that I spoke with about Paul could not in any greater terms describe a person that wanted to win more than Paul wants to win it, and that will work harder to do it. So, as we went through the process, we heard a lot of good things about our team, and we kept feeling better and better. And it really reinforced what we thought, is that this is not a rebuild; it's a tweaking.
Mike, for me, I've had a few interviews over time. I just don't think it was the right situation. Fortunately, I think Craig has known me for a long time, even though it was in a different capacity, and he probably felt some comfort with me because of the way that I talk about things, the passion that I try to bring to your organization, your staff. I'm very passionate about what I do. I am very family orientated, not only with them over there on our left, but this organization has a very good substance to it, and I want to bring family atmosphere here. I want to have us all be together as a family, because when you work as a family and you have the right intentions, I believe that you're gonna be able to win here, and that's the biggest thing that I'm gonna bring here is an inclusiveness and passion that people are gonna want to go that extra mile to help us win.
Go ahead, Murph.
Brian Murphy, St. Paul Pioneer Press, over here, Paul.
Thank you.
As you were going through the interview process and based on what you've been able to evaluate thus far of the roster, what is missing from making this a successful postseason team?
Should I go 1 to 10 on what's missing, or
if there's 10, go for it.
Certainly, I've just got here. I've told Craig what I think the possibilities of different tweaks that we can make, but honestly, let me meet with our staff. I haven't even met with our staff yet to really get their take on it. The fun part about my job is being able to now go hear the insides of what's happening here. I will lean on our leaders over here to give me their insight as well. I'm gonna talk to everyone. I want to get to know what our organization has, what their opinions are, meld it together, see what my eyes. I've been very successful being able to determine what talent level I'm looking for, evaluating players. And I may just have a different set of eyes than what has been here before, and it hopefully tweaks something that we're gonna be able to get here.
Paul, this is Chris Hine from the Minneapolis Star Tribune right here. In Nashville, you guys were never afraid to make trades that maybe surprised the league and shook up the roster. Do you plan on adopting maybe a similar mindset here, being aggressive when the situation might present itself in the trade market?
I would have to say yes. I like to think outside the box. I like our people to think outside the box. I think that when you look at the moves that we made there, they were there. We made hockey trades. We were able to make hockey trades, and a lot of times in this new cap world that we have, you're not able to do that. But we had a creative set of people that looked at the situation and tried to evaluate it and then make the right call. So, I'll look at small trades. I'll look at big trades. Whatever is going to improve this organization going forward to give us a chance to win the Stanley Cup, we're going to look at.
Paul, this is Dave Easytime with the St. Paul Pioneer Press. You mentioned you've been working at this for a long time. Was there a moment you doubted that this moment would come?
I don't know if there's a doubt. It's interesting. If you ever tried to get to the next level, sometimes you do get frustrated. You're looking at it and you're saying, is my time ever going to come? But no, there was never a give up process for me. I come from a working background as well. My dad was a police officer, and he's the reason that I'm here. So I will never give up. That's the biggest thing. I will give everything that I can to make this organization successful.
Paul, Jess Myers with 1500 ESPN Radio. The draft is 1 month from today. What's that timeline going to look like for you? I'm guessing you generally spend more than a month prepping for a draft.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to sleep the next month. The strength of every organization, as Craig was saying, is the draft. It's the draft. It's the way that we develop. It's the way that we're going to put our minor league system in place. I've run Milwaukee for pretty much 20 years. Had a hand in there even when I was the director of player personnel. I believe that your minor league team has to be your vaulting stone to get to the next level. When we made the Stanley Cup Finals 2 years ago, I think we had 17 drafted players that had come from Milwaukee. That's a great feather in our cap for our staff, for the development people, for our coaches that are there. The last 6 coaches that we hired in Milwaukee made their way to the NHL or had come from the NHL and have become successful. And so it's getting the right people in place. I want to evaluate everything that we have here before anything is determined, but that's the biggest part, is to draft and develop, put the right plan in place, and then go forward.
Hi, Paul. Sarah McClellan from the Star Tribune. Hi.
Hi, Sarah.
Why did this situation appeal to you, and what about the roster stands out as strengths to build off right now?
Well, the thing that is most attractive is, Craig has given this organization the opportunity to be a cap team right from the very, very beginning. There is no floor here. We have the opportunity to put pieces in place and not have to worry about it. He's been a phenomenal owner, giving them the opportunity to have a chance to win. The roster, as you say, has some star players, has some young players that are growing and getting better, and I see it as an opportunity that we can grow together.
Paul, Dave Campbell, Associated Press. What do you think is the most important thing for you to move from that number 2 guy to the guy in charge of everything, as sort of your mindset as you relate to people and make decisions?
I don't know if there's one thing. The staff in Nashville that primarily I put together because of my relationships with the different guys and the scouts, it puts you in that position regardless if you believe it or not. Like, there's always a point guy, but I just think it's probably just being out here in the public and being the one that's asked the questions from you guys instead of the people that are behind the closed doors that you're really making the decisions about.
Craig, Jim Suhan, Minneapolis Star Tribune. Was it just you and Mike making the decision? Did you have anybody else as a sounding board? And did you have to guard at all against hiring somebody you obviously like and respect so much? Did you have to, weigh that?
It was Matt Maka, not Mike Russo. It was Matt. And, Yeah, yes, it really was. I mean, it really was the two of us, and yeah, I'd say that there was. One reason I had Matt in there is to kind of keep me honest on everything, and going into this, I would say probably Paul was number one on my list, and as we had our list and the list kept growing, and we kept interviewing people, he just stayed number one, and there were just so many what we felt were really important factors that and qualities that we were looking for that Paul has. And going into the last week or so, I'm still wondering, okay, who's it going to be? I got to make a decision. But after the second round of interviews, it was just clear that Paul was our guy.
Any other questions?
Paul Crisine from the Star Tribune again. What role do you see analytics playing in your job, and how do you foresee building up an analytics staff here, and just where does that fit in your plans for the organization?
Well, certainly looking at the information that's provided by the analytics team is always something that I will look at and go for. I don't believe that any decisions are going to primarily be made by analytics, but it will support everything that we do with our eyes, and that's the most important thing. I will use every resource that we have.
Paul, Bruce Brothers from Minnesota Hockey Magazine. Going back to your college days, did you play with Jim Craig, and what do you remember about those days and the rivalry between Minnesota and Massachusetts, specifically in college hockey?
I was at BU with Jimmy for 1 year and played with him, and he was terrific. All of our things were, we played here, I think my sophomore year, at the U over Christmas, if I'm not mistaken, and that was 1980, so that's a long time ago. A lot of you weren't born by then, including you guys over there. It was a great experience, great rivalry. I really respect the state of hockey. This place is incredible. I mean, I go back to the high school things. I played in the state tournament in Massachusetts at the old Boston Garden, and thought that was the ultimate of pinnacles from a high school standpoint. And then I came here and I started watching the high school tournament for the draft and what have you, and there is nothing like it that's left like this. I respect these kids for the way that they have their roots here, and they want to be part of the culture of the way that this state of hockey has been built. And I'm really looking forward to it. Having your colleges so close with the U and Minnesota State and get to St. Cloud. I mean, I'll continue to watch all of this because I think it's part of the fabric that I'm built with. I'm not necessarily just going to be a sit here type of guy. The way that I work, the feel that I think I have for the game is going to continue to be that way.
Paul, Brian Murphy with the St. Paul Pioneer Press again over here. What demands do you have for a head coach, and how does Bruce fit those demands?
Well, I think we got to get to know each other before I start to stress certain things. Bruce is a very successful coach and has been. So what we're going to work on is the two of us, how we're going to get to the next level, and then how we're going to integrate everybody that we have here. And that's the most important thing, is me building a relationship, him starting to learn to trust me, to trust what I'm going to see, and look at certain things that maybe, again, an outside eye, as Craig has said before, is it's different. And maybe you can just give them some ideas as to what I'm looking for. But I'm not going to tell Bruce how to coach. I've never been a coach. I've been on the management side of things. I can evaluate and I can tell you what I see in certain situations. But the coach is going to coach and the manager is going to manage, and we're going to meld together.
Paul, Michael Russo again. Similarly, with the hockey ops staff, what are your plans for them going forward, especially this close to the draft and then beyond that?
Mike, I'm gonna get. I know some of these guys from being out in the field and various things, but I'm just going to try to get to know our staff here. I think they have a very good staff in place. I just want to get to know them and see how we mesh together. Again, it's a getting to know process right now.
Paul Chesmeyers from 1500 ESPN. Vegas is kind of the talk of the NHL right now, obviously, with what they've done on the ice. But have you and people in your position looked at what George McPhee has done putting a roster together and with draft picks and kind of taken any lessons from that story as a putting a team together standpoint?
Congratulations to them. They've done an amazing job. He's done a great job. Their team has, their coaches have, the players have, playing with a chip on their shoulder because they weren't wanted or what have you. The difference between, Vegas and Nashville when Craig came in, the rules changed quite a bit, and it's really interesting. I'm going to be curious to see how they even change it more when Seattle comes in here in a couple of years. I
I'll
see
be involved
everything.
in that if I can. Trust me. It won't happen again.
Well, different things happen for different reasons. Different organizations made different moves and what have you. The interesting part is we will start to talk about this immediately as a staff and where we're going and trying to prepare. We had already started preparing in Nashville for it because of anticipation that sometimes it really affected some of our signings and what have you, and that's just part of the process of trying to get there. It's real easy to sit here now and throw stones and say that this guy did this and this guy did that. We lost James Neal. We could have done something else to make it happen. I'll never throw stones at anybody. It's really hard to sit in this position, and what Chuck had to go through. I read a lot of your stuff that says that he did the wrong thing. I've looked at it and I'm saying this, I'm like, what would I have done? Well, I'm not going to tell you what I would have done, but there's a lot of people out there that don't look like they made the right decision, but why don't we just give them credit? They did a great job.
Quick follow-up. Who gets the BU job?
It isn't me.
Thanks, everyone. We'll wrap up the Q&A session, and we'll now make Craig and Paul available for one-on-ones. And lunch is also available behind us inside Gate 1, Dan. Lunch is ready.
Lunch, yeah.
Well, it's now official. Paul Fenton is the third general manager in Minnesota Wild history. We will be heading back over to the arena and hear directly from the new GM in just a moment. A couple of things that stand out from his comments. Number one, he talked about how much importance they placed on their minor league system, their draft and development process. He oversaw that process in Nashville, made some outstanding selections in the draft, and a big reason why that Nashville club was built the way they were. He made mention of the fact that when they made their run to the Cup Finals, they had 17 players who had been drafted and made their way to the NHL through Milwaukee, their AHL club. A couple of significant players. Ryan Suter, of course, was their first-round pick in that loaded 2003 draft. That same year, they drafted Shea Weber in the second round. The next year, grabbed Pekka Rinne in one of the great late-round picks, maybe in NHL history. Rinne was an 8th-round pick in the 2004 draft. Roman Josi, a player grabbed in the second round a few years later in 2008. All of those players, significant pieces in Nashville, and of course Suter and Weber have since been traded, but both brought significant players in return. Weber, of course, went to Montreal and brought P.K. Subban, who became a big part of it. Suter jumping via free agency to Minnesota. Speaking of Ryan Suter, he and Zach Parise, you heard him mention they were there today to listen in on what Paul Fenton had to say, along with the captain, Mikko Koivu. And Suter, a player that Fenton knows well. He drafted him back in 2003. Suter was the 7th overall pick in that draft. Zach Parise was drafted later in that same first round. These two guys, such a huge part of the Minnesota Wild's core. Suter did not play at all in that Winnipeg series due to the injury late in the season. Parise went out during the Game 3 victory that really changed the series and swung it into Winnipeg's favor, something Minnesota was unable to overcome. Those two players will be a part of the future here in Minnesota, no doubt. And speaking of Zach Parise, let's head back over to the Xcel Energy Center. He's with our Kevin Gordon.
All right, Zach, first off, what excites you about this hire for the Minnesota Wild?
Yeah, I think as the way he had a hand in building the Predators, not where they were winning the President's Trophy this year and making it to the finals the year before. They've done a lot of good things down there, and I think we're all excited. Everyone, you just anticipate the changes that are going to happen, but I think we're all looking forward to another year.
As a veteran player that sees plenty of years left, but certainly the time is now if you want to win a cup. When he talks about tweaking from a leadership perspective, how do guys like you, Ryan, and Mikko Koivu kind of help this process along?
Well, there's not much we can do. I mean, they're the GMs for a reason, and we play. That's pretty much all we can do. And as a player, again, you don't know what they see. You don't know what the direction that they like, that they want. It sounds like nothing, but I mean, our job is to go and play with the roster that they put together, and that's pretty much all we can do.
You help maybe facilitate when those new players come in, if there are trades, if there are tweaks to bring that team together. He talked about family being a big part of it.
Yeah, I of course you do. I mean, we definitely echo what he's saying, and we believe in that a lot. And it's not as if that wasn't the case before, but I like what he said when you want to bring a family atmosphere around the rink, around the locker room for everybody's families, and when you do get a new guy, you want him to feel at home right away. And I know for me, switching teams, it's tough. It's a big change. There's a lot of different things. So any way you can facilitate a new guy coming in, if there is a new guy, to make life a little easier for him, make him feel a part of the group right away, I think that's, for a guy like myself, that's one of the jobs.
Wild forward Zach Parise reacting to the new general manager hire for the Minnesota Wild, Mr. Paul Fenton.
And Parise, as you saw, those numbers a little bit misleading because of the fact that he missed the first half of the season this year after his surgery. Was brilliant for Minnesota down the stretch, playing his best hockey of the season in the playoffs when he suffered that fractured sternum that knocked him out during Game 3. One of the other things that Fenton mentioned is the fact that this is a get-to-know-you process for he and his staff, scouting staff. He mentioned the way that analytics will play a factor, but he also said that he had an awareness of this roster because of the fact that he had seen them over the years, had been out in the field, had crossed paths with the scouting staff. And make no mistake about it, he's well aware of the seasons that Jason Zucker and Matt Dumba had and the very difficult decisions ahead, as these two players must be signed this offseason, each coming off of career-best seasons. Zucker last year, 33 goals, one of the top 5 single-season goal seasons in Wild history. Zucker had a career-high 64 total points on the season, and Matt Dumba contributed 14 goals and 36 assists from the blue line. These guys both restricted free agents. Both must be signed this offseason. That'll be two of the biggest decisions that are faced by the new GM, Paul Fenton, as he prepares for this upcoming free agent season. And, of course, the draft, you heard him say, unlikely that he'll sleep over the next month in preparation for the draft. Let's hear from the man himself. We go back over to the arena, Kevin Gorg, with the new general manager, Paul Fenton.
Paul, first off, welcome to Minnesota. It's great to have you on board as our new general manager. The lessons learned in Nashville. You've seen a great run recently for your hockey club, working with David Poile. How much does that give you hope that you can do something similar with this team?
Well, this team has a lot of pieces in place. I'm really looking forward to it. We've built that in Nashville to the point where we could tweak it and make some interesting trades, some big ones, some small ones. Everything is about personnel. Everything is about trying to make the right decisions, and that's what I'm planning on bringing here.
How much does it help that you've been in Nashville? So you've been in the Central Division, you've been in the Western Conference. You know this roster, and you know what they're up against as well.
Well, honestly, the West is such a different animal than the East, as all of us watch and see the way that it portrays. And I love the West. I think the West is the way that the game is played right. So much skill, so much speed, so much passion. And this team has a lot of those ingredients, and we're going to look to add to that.
When you look at this roster, you mentioned it earlier in your press conference about some of the veteran talent. I know you've got a relationship from way back when you drafted Ryan Suter, but what are the pieces you like right now with the Minnesota Wild?
Certainly the leadership group that was here today and supporting us in this decision. They're going to put us on the map. They're the ones that are going to give you the right voice that we need going forward here. I'll add my tweaks to it as we talk to the staff and everything, but this leadership group is the one that you really got to lean on.
Is your family ready for some Minnesota winners?
Yeah, you know, we're Massachusetts people, the same kind of winters that we grew up with, and yeah, we're really looking forward to it. This is a great place. It's a great place to live. It's a great family atmosphere, and I'm looking forward to my wife, especially seeing what the atmosphere is here. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say about Duluth winning the national championship because I didn't mention them up there. So congratulations to them, and I meant to add them on to my talk up there.
The third general manager in the history of the Minnesota Wild, Mr. Paul Fenton.
Interesting to hear him talk about life in the Western Conference. It's a rigid conference, no doubt about it, and he's been a part of the Central Division. He knows only too well how difficult it is to escape the Central Division. Nashville was able to do it as the President's Trophy winner this year, finishing on top of the division, but then knocked out in the playoffs by Winnipeg. Last year, they did win a couple of rounds in the playoffs to get out of the Central and move into the Stanley Cup Finals. But if you look over the last 6 seasons, all 7 teams in the Central have made the playoffs at least twice. Nobody's made it more often than the Minnesota Wild. Chicago, of course, has had a couple of cup runs during that time in 2013 and 2015. Nashville made a run to the Stanley Cup Finals in 2017. This is going to be a very difficult division over the coming seasons. Nashville is still one of the deepest teams in the National Hockey League. We saw Winnipeg this year finally experience some playoff success and reach the Western Conference Finals. Colorado was back in the playoffs this year after a hiatus. St. Louis had their playoff run snapped this season as they were eliminated on the final day by Colorado, but the Blues certainly figure to be a contender quickly again next season. Minnesota did have an outstanding year this year, finished third in the Central, over 100 points once more. And it was on the shoulders of Eric Stahl, who had one of the brilliant single seasons in Minnesota history. A guy who looked like he was on the downward side of his career, has had 2 great seasons with the Wild. This past season tied the franchise record by scoring 42 goals in a single season. Stahl has 1 year left on his contract that was signed under the previous general manager, Chuck Fletcher. This will be one of the decisions during the course of the next year that will face Paul Fenton. But it's interesting, he comes from a Nashville club that was built around depth rather than superstars at the top. In fact, over the last couple seasons, Nashville hasn't had an individual score more than 33 goals in a season. Minnesota got 42 from Stahl this year, and you can see the season I mentioned earlier, Jason Zucker scoring 33. 2 of the top 5 all-time single-season goal numbers posted this past season by Minnesota forwards Stahl and Zucker. They were a part of an offense that again was up over 3 goals per season. A little bit down in terms of NHL rankings from the season before when they were the second highest scoring team in the National Hockey League. But these last 2 seasons under the helm of Bruce Boudreau, it was interesting to hear Fenton talk about Boudreau saying, you know, I really haven't had a chance to sit down yet and talk to he and the rest of the staff, get their ideas on evaluations of what this team needs, where this team must go. What Boudreau has accomplished in his 2 seasons here with Minnesota, the back-to-back 100-point seasons, significant. Let's hear now from the owner, Craig Leipold. We go back to the arena. Kevin Gorg with Craig Leipold.
First off, Craig, congratulations. I know it's been tough times trying to figure out which direction you're going to go and what a big decision this is for the organization. What excites you about the new relationship that he'll have with this team?
Well, Paul Fenton has a tremendous amount of experience. I've known Paul for a long time, so I really feel like we've got a really good relationship. We know each other. I know where he's coming from. The organization that he was with, I think, is one that we look at and say, you know, they've really done it right, and we've kind of done it right as well. I mean, our team is really good, and I think Paul is going to be there to, you know, help us tweak it, maybe bring in a player or two, and he's a guy, as he mentioned today, he likes to think out of the box. He likes to challenge his organization, and hopefully that'll help us bring a couple players over.
You mentioned the success that the Predators have had. They've found some jewels late in the draft. They've made some really aggressive trades that have turned heads throughout the National Hockey League. How much on a daily basis do you communicate with your general manager about maybe taking some of those chances and having some success in those avenues?
Yeah, you know, that's a tough question to answer because I don't, you know, they are the ones who bring it up. So I don't say, hey, you know, let's go out and get a trade. You know, it's all an opportunistic thing. So So he hears a rumor that maybe a player is available or someone's shopping somebody, and then that's kind of how it starts. I think it would be a scary time if I were to walk down to the general manager. Come on, let's do something. Let's shake it up. Let's shake it up. So it's really taking advantage of an opportunity. But I think what I want him to know is that that he has the green light. And if he sees something that's going to make us better, let's talk about it if we need to, if it's a budget issue. But if it's a player trade, it's a hockey trade, let's go make it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
The owner of the Minnesota Wild, Mr. Craig Leipold.
Craig Leipold made it clear in the news conference the day he announced that they would not renew the contract of the previous general manager, Chuck Fletcher, that he did not look at this as a rebuild. He echoed those thoughts today, said that the other candidates interviewed all supported that analysis of this club, that it just needed some tweaking, not a rebuild. The team that Paul Fenton inherits is a team that's had tremendous success over the last few years, in the regular season in particular. Over the last 2 years, if you look at their ranks in the National Hockey League in the key categories, top 7 in goals per game, top 8 in goals against and save percentage, and the overall record, 94 wins in those 2 seasons, tied for the 4th best record in the National Hockey League over the last 2 years. You go back a couple of years further than that, and this club has had 3 100-point seasons in the last 4 years, playoffs 6 years in a row, and that really is the big question for this general manager, because of the fact that this club has been knocked out in the first round each of the last 3 years, 2-6 record in playoff series over the last 6 years, but that 6 consecutive runs to the playoffs, the longest active streak in the Western Conference, second longest streak in the NHL. You heard Craig Leipold mention that today, that look, we've been to the playoffs 6 years in a row. We've got the core of a great hockey team here. We just need somebody to come in and make those final couple of decisions to push us over the hump. Paul Fenton seemed to say the same thing when he said that's what we were trying to do in Nashville, was just make the little move, that put the final stamp on things, so to speak, that got them into the Stanley Cup Finals a year ago, got them to the President's Trophy this year and a Central Division championship, and the look of a club that's going to be a contender for years to come in Nashville. Bruce Boudreau has been at the helm of behind the bench, at least, for Minnesota here over the last 2 years. Back-to-back 100-point seasons. Let's get his thoughts on the new general manager, Paul Fenton. We go back to the rink. He's with Kevin Gord.
Well, Coach, first off, what excites you about this new chapter for the Minnesota Wild hiring of Paul Fenton?
I think it's a great new chapter. I mean, it's a new challenge for everybody. And, as Paul's wife said, and my wife echoes the statements all the time, it's a new adventure. And I think if you get excited about the new adventure, then that's great, and that's what we are. We're excited. We got along and loved Chuck to death, but this is a new adventure, and I think it's going to, just listening to him up there, I haven't had a real chance to talk philosophies or anything yet, but I think we're going to be on the same page in an awful lot of things.
With your years of experience working with multiple general managers, how much impact will you try to have early on, letting them know where this team is at and where they need to go?
Well, I'm going to give them my opinions. Good or bad. I'm going to lay it right out there what I think. I mean, it's his decisions. I'm just going to give him, and I've always been one of those guys, whoever you give me, I'm going to work with, and I'm hoping we're going to have success. But it's, I'm not going to, and for want of a better word, I can't think of a want of a better word, so I don't want to use the word I'm thinking of. I'm not going to just mince around there. I'm going to tell him the truth. And it might surprise him. It might not surprise him. He might see the same thing from afar and not have said anything and go, damn, you're right. And that's the way I feel. Or he might say there's no chance that that's happening. So, but I don't know. But I'm just going to, I can only give him my assessment and then go from there.
I know how much you love hockey, how much you love to watch playoff hockey. Watching what Nashville's done with him involved in that organization, and watching now the way the playoffs have unfolded in the Western Conference with Vegas going to the Cup, how much will that impact where you think this team needs to go?
Well, I mean, geez, we're close. I really thought that Winnipeg was going to go all the way, and but they looked tired in the end, and Vegas looked fresh. But I think Nashville, if you look at it, they're built very similarly to the way we're built. I mean, they got their top 4 defensemen that everybody raves about. We have our top 4 defensemen that everybody raves about. They were number 1 in defensive scoring. I think we were number 2. They wanted to be. They were a 4-line team. That's what we wanted to be. It was a 4-line team. Maybe they were a little deeper than us, but I think the philosophy and the theory is the same. So just a couple things we have to, like they said, tweak. I mean, we're good. And, I think very easily that could have been a longer series against Winnipeg. And if I looked at the other series, I mean, we were 3-0 against San Jose, 3-0 against Vegas. Sometimes it's the right fit, and sometimes it's the matchups are, if you look at it, we were 3-1 against Nashville. The only team we had a losing record against in the playoffs was Winnipeg. So, I mean, it was not a great matchup for us. And I still think it should have been at least 6 games. But I already got fined for saying what I thought, so
we won't go there again.
We won't go there anymore.
The head coach of the Minnesota Wild, Bruce Boudreau, guys.
And no fines will be assessed on today's show for the head coach. The Wild's record against the Final 4 teams in the Western Conference, you heard him mention it, overall 10-4-1 against those 4. That gives you some kind of an indication of just how close this team is to the elite teams. I think it's interesting when you look at the comparisons between the Wild and Nashville. I think the head coach is spot on, built with a mobile defensive core that could score, and also a team that perhaps lacks what you'd call the true sniper up front. Nashville's done it with depth. A couple of guys that have been right around 30 goals, but not an Alex Ovechkin in the bunch, not a guy scoring 45 to 50 each season. Minnesota's been built in a similar fashion, a team built on depth, a team built on the ability to defend. And as Boudreau mentioned, Wild went 3-0 against Vegas this year, 3-0 against San Jose, 3-1-1 against Nashville. Good records against all the teams that figure to be the contenders in the Western Conference here for years to come. Paul Fenton hired as the new general manager for the Minnesota Wild. He brings with him connections to a couple of these Wild players, connections to the owner, Craig Leipold, as you heard him talk about earlier, connections to Ryan Suter. He was the director of player personnel in Nashville when Suter was drafted back in 2003. He's been the assistant general manager in Nashville since 2006. Instrumental in the building of that roster, which many people will talk about as the model for success right now in the Western Conference because of the depth that they have in their lineup, their ability to defend, and of course the top-notch goaltender in Pekka Rinne, who was selected in the 8th round of the draft back in 2004. Fenton now takes over this tweaking process in Minnesota. Let's head back over to the arena one last time. Our analyst here on Fox Sports North, Mike Greenlay, standing by with Kevin Gordon.
All right, Mike, your thoughts on what you heard today from our new general manager, Paul Fenton?
You know, what I like about him is he's a development guy. He's a kind of guy that wants to build from the draft, and that's how you got to build hockey teams, especially this day and age when you have players with long-term contracts, players with no move, no trade type clauses. You got to build from within, and that's exciting. But the only thing you have to keep in mind is when you build that way, there's a little bit of a time frame involved. So in order to make the tweaks, I think he's going to have to make some moves. And like any GM says, if we can make some good moves that are going to help us, then we'll make them. But we're not going to make them just for the sake of making them.
And we've seen Paul Fenton's work. We've seen Nashville, especially in the last 5 years, whether it's jewels in the draft like Arvidsson, big-time trades when they traded Shea Weber for PK Subban. This is not a guy that should be afraid to make those subtle tweaks, as he called it earlier today.
Yeah, I don't think he's afraid to make moves, and that's a good thing. You need a guy like that that's aggressive in this day and age that's going to make those types of moves. So I guess we'll see what happens going forward. I mean, keep in mind, he right now has the benefit of 2 scouting staffs because he has all the information from Nashville and he's going to meet and get to know our guys. So he'll have a lot of information that he can use. Scouts that have seen different things. He has his own mindset, I'm sure, about what he wants to do. But he's also seems like the type of guy that's going to take direction from the people around him, which is terrific because you don't want just a one-man band. You want a guy that's going to kind of absorb the knowledge from everybody that's around him. So hopefully he does that. Hopefully he makes some moves here that get the Wild to that next step.
our analyst Mike Greenlay. We're wrapping up an exciting day over here in downtown St. Paul, guys.
Exciting, and you heard Paul Fenton talk about that. You also heard Bruce Boudreau say it's time to embrace the excitement of a new challenge and a new change. A new era in Minnesota Wild hockey begins today as they announce Paul Fenton as their third general manager. We'll see what happens here in the coming months. 1 month to the draft, free agency just around the corner after that. Paul Fenton, the new general manager. We thank you for joining us today for this Minnesota Wild special report. Congratulations to Paul Fenton, the new general manager of the Minnesota Wild.